most popular comic book in the world today is coming to life. Sneak preview of X-Men this Saturday morning on Fox.
Welcome, hanging out with me, Saturday morning cartoons. That's right. We're going to watch a X-Men animated series, talk about that episode and the comic book a little bit, because this is really possibly among the greatest comic book story arcs ever done. It holds up so great. It's one of the first things I reread right as I kind of started doing the Pops thing, really kind of dedicating so much more time to it. The Dark Phoenix Saga is just tremendous. I don't really think it can properly be adapted. We've tried a couple times. I think they just need to let that ship sail and stop messing with it. The animated series has a good enough adaptation, direct people there, and capitalize accordingly. So before I get too much into just any other stuff, let's just go through the episode a little bit, and then we can just kind of talk about it. So this is a multi-part series where they're going to get into this, and it seems only fitting and the only way to do it justice, because in the comic book, you not only have Jean, she's been imbued with the Phoenix, she has this power inside of her. It has served its purpose, but she still has this struggle. And the Phoenix itself is now starting to respond to the fact that Jean has emotions. She has these different things that are happening in her life. And the Phoenix itself wants to have sort of an interaction with that. We also come in contact with a ton of new characters, which this episode does a great job of introducing with actual, Hellfire Club mutants who have ill intent. We get to see sort of like an antagonist of the X-Men that are more like intellectual. Like it's more of a there is physical fighting, but it's not like we're dealing with like a saber tooth and even Magneto. It's a different type of villain, a different type of antagonist, and we get those characters as well. So all of that is fantastic in this. I think it brings all of that to life pretty well, and you can see them trying to experiment. The professor's there with Moira, and they're trying to figure out what to do, and she's so powerful. When she becomes Phoenix, she just destroys everything. Meanwhile, the X-Men, we end up with just really not a lot of time for most of the characters, but we do get a little bit with Scott and Gambit. They go to a club and they end up seeing a performer there who turns out to be Dazzler. So they're applauding. There's Gambit when he's all his animation is kind of odd when he's not in his outfit. Anyway, so she's very powerful, but she there's some sort of conflict with her, with people trying to get to her, that kind of thing. And that's what we get to see. And Scott intervenes, and she's got the hots for Scott right away. That's pretty much what's going on. And Scott's trying to find out what's going on with Jean. Jean's back in town, basically. And then we have the Hellfire Club. We get to see the different mutants and what they're capable of doing, what their scheme is. And all of this is very much exposition. So, right, because the show's made for kids, 1992. Let's just spend a minute, have the villains explain what they're trying to accomplish, recap things about the Phoenix, just in case you haven't seen those episodes and stories. So I think all of this was actually very, very good. And I have to say, this animation is beautiful.
Primal force returned to Earth.
So there's narration here, but look at the animation. The animation is gorgeous. They just do, and I gotta be honest, in some ways, it may be better than when they aired it the first part of the story arc. It's really, really good. Before we cut back to Xavier, so that's kind of how that plays up, and you can see Jean and I, the hard thing I have with Jean's character is so much of her identity is tied up in all of this Phoenix stuff. Excuse me, that once you get down that rabbit hole, there's kind of like not a way to enjoy just Jean again. I enjoyed the 90s um, uh, X-Men so much because it felt like we were really having a good, we had a love interest type thing going on with Jean and Scott and Wolverine, but we also had a lot of power of how powerful Jean is, and Cyclops being a good leader, the irrational behavior of Wolverine. And but once if we spend our wheels in too much time with all of the Phoenix stuff, it just consumes everything. It creates a little bit of a problem with some of your storytelling. but we get different powers and different characters that are sort of introduced, which I think is, again, this is great because um for folks that don't really know all of this stuff, right? It has to be um something pretty cool to like, oh wow, this is kind of cool. Let me get into this. Let me find out more, right? So you see Emma Frost and you're seeing this like sexy lady with all this white outfit on, and she's able to have psychic powers as well. You see all of that. And the fact that she's so key as a psychic to be able to figure out how they're going to mastermind this scheme to try to control Jean, right? They're going to do this thing by manipulating her into this dream world where she thinks she's in Victorian age, right? And you have conflict because now Scott's trying to go see Dazzler, and then this guy is mastermind's putting on this little thing where she thinks she's in like Victorian era, right? So everything she's experiencing through the lens that he's making her want to see, and it's this manipulation that they're doing, creating this dream world. So she can't understand the difference between what the Hellfire Club wants her to see and what reality actually is. And by the time we have Jean coming back into interaction, she shows up right when Scott and Dazzler just throws a big kiss on him. And you have all this conversation about all this. So, again, this is the first part of a longer series. Here's the kiss that we get with Dazzler. And I got to be honest, if there was the biggest of complaint I had, Dazzler did not seem drawn right for the show. Um, versus the comic book. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what the design was, but she was obviously much more voluptuous. She didn't have this weird jacket thing on and stuff like that. So just doesn't quite work for me. But the fact that, when you cut back here and you have the different characters, Sebastian Shaw and Pierce and Leland, and there's a ton of characters, a ton of interesting things that are happening. And again, I think you were doing a very good, faithful interpretation of the comic book. You're taking your time. You are pointing your people back to interesting things, which is something that's kind of a lost thing. There's not as much of appreciation of the past and again how great this story arc is, because if it wasn't for these stories back then, if Claremont's stories, we wouldn't even have X-Men. He changed it. He made this digestible. He made this such an interesting dynamic for team storytelling that we have X-Men that carried on after this. So I wish there was more appreciation within modern stuff. So we get with our fight scene here, and it's okay. It is a good introduction to who the Hellfire.
Just flipped your last ace.
There's a lot of powers that are going on, a lot of things we actually just get to know snippets of things. Again, the biggest disappointment I have, of course, is we don't have the music, man. We don't kick into the season one. No, we don't have that. But it definitely does showcase all of that, and also showcases, the Phoenix. Phoenix does show up, and she's super, super powerful, of course, and that's going to set up another episode. So, our first part, Dark Phoenix Saga. Are you familiar with the comic book? Is something that you want to read or not? There's definitely an easy way to get trade paperbacks on that, so you can get it inexpensively. Original first print comics are going to be pretty pricey. That's probably one of the most popular X-Men, Uncanny X-Men story runs. It's been around a long time now. We maybe in the early 70s. I don't have the dates in front of me, but it's at least 45 years or so. It's been a while. But it's a great story. It's a fantastic story, but a lot of stuff's happening. A lot of characters, new characters, first appearances, changes in dynamics with Jean and Scott, and all this stuff's going to happen. So it's great to get to this part in the animated series to be able to relive this. I think the execution on the show was fantastic. Again, other than missing that theme song and then a couple little minor design issues, this is top tier, man. This is a great episode. So hope you enjoy it. Hope you take a time to tell me your thoughts on X-Men, the show, your comics, these stories, what you enjoy or don't, and what you want to see on some of that kind of stuff as this Dark Phoenix Saga unfolds. So thanks for watching. I am Pops.
Action with the Blackbird jet, the X-Men 3-stage fighter. It's a combat command cockpit. It's a land runner. It's an attack glider. And a cerebral mutant detector.
Activate multi-directional missile pod. Fire 1, fire 2.
The hypersonic Blackbird jet. X-Men figures sold separately. Introducing X-Men projectors. X-Men figures that light your walls with X-Men adventures. Put one adventure disc inside Wolverine, then project the pictures. You control the action. Change discs for different adventures.
Gotcha!
X-Men projectors sold separately with 3 action adventure discs.
$6 million man, ready to operate and command. Colonel Steve Austin is the $6 million man, complete with the technology to replace his bionic modules. Check him out with the bionic transport and repair station. Control his amazing lifting strength. See through his wide-angle bionic eye. The man, his bionic transport that becomes a repair station, and a working backpack radio.
Open the jaw bridge.
The powers of evil control Castle Grayskull.
Oh yeah, Dad, what's Ram Man's power? I'll get us inside, He-Man.
Ram Man, He-Man, and Castle Grayskull, each sold separately. You have to put the castle together.
Ram Man, use your head. I just did. Not that way. We have a prisoner.
Good. Who's the prisoner?
You are, because we have the power.
Oh, no.
Ram Man and He-Man from the Masters of the Universe collection, each sold separately. Castle Grayskull also sold separately from Mattel.